The world collapsed in a symphony of screeching tires and shattering glass. One moment, I was pulling Clara away from the curb, her laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. The next, a blinding light, an impossible force, and then a profound, terrifying silence. When I woke up, the silence was still there, but it had settled deep inside me, in the half of my body that no longer answered my commands. The doctors used words like permanent and T4 vertebra and paraplegia. I just called it the end of my life as I knew it. Clara, miraculously untouched thanks to my shove, sat by my bedside, her hand in mine, tears streaming down her face. She called me her hero, her savior. For a few weeks in the sterile white world of the hospital, I believed her. I believed that love, our love, was the one thing that hadn't been shattered. I was wrong. The real crash, the one that would truly break me, was still coming. My name is Alex Miller. I'm 34 years old. Before the accident, I was an architect. Not the kind who designs gleaming skyscrapers that pierce the clouds, but a specialist in historical restoration. I found beauty in the forgotten, strength in the old bones of buildings left to decay. I loved the meticulous process of stripping away the rot to find the solid heartwood beneath, of reinforcing a foundation so that something beautiful could stand tall once more. It was quiet, methodical work, and it suited me. My life was built on the same principles. Find a solid foundation, build with care, and cherish what lasts. I thought Clara was part of that foundation. But let me start from the beginning. Clara and I had been together for 5 years. We met at a university fundraiser. I was there because my firm had restored the historic library on campus, and she was working for the Alumni Relations Department. She was vibrant, a spark of energy in a room full of staid academics and wealthy donors. She said she loved my passion for my work, the way my eyes lit up when I talked about saving a piece of history. I was captivated by her ambition, her easy charm, her way of making everyone feel like the most important person in the room. We fell in love quickly, or at least I did. Our life together was comfortable. I made a good living, enough for us to have a nice apartment downtown, take a couple of decent vacations a year, and put money away. My tastes were simple. A good book, a quiet dinner at home, a long walk through the city's historic district. These were my pleasures. Clara, however, had an appetite for more. She loved the galas, the society pages, the thrill of being seen at the right restaurants with the right people. Her social media was a curated gallery of expensive cocktails and designer labels, many of which were gifts from me on birthdays and anniversaries. "Look at this," she'd say, showing me a picture on her phone of her friend Veronica on a yacht in Monaco. "Can you imagine, Alex? Just for a week, to live like that." I would smile and nod. "It looks nice, but I'd probably get seasick. Besides, who would water the plants?" She would laugh, a light, tinkling sound, but there was always a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. She saw my contentment as a lack of drive. My focus on my craft, she called my little hobby her mother, Eleanor, was worse. Eleanor viewed me with a thinly veiled disdain, her eyes always scanning me as if calculating my net worth and finding it wanting. "An architect," she'd said when Clara first introduced us, her tone making it sound like I collected garbage for a living. "Is there much future in old buildings?" "There's a lot of past in them," I'd replied calmly. That's the point. Despite these undercurrents, I was committed. I loved her and I believed in us. I was saving for a ring, and I just put a down payment on a house, an old Victorian brownstone on a quiet, tree-lined street. It was a wreck, neglected for decades, but I saw its potential. I saw the solid oak staircase under layers of cheap paint, the original fireplaces boarded up, the beautiful bones waiting to be brought back to life. It was my ultimate restoration project, a home for us, built with my own 2 hands. I planned to propose to her on the day I finished the main floor. Then came the accident. A drunk driver ran a red light, barreling towards us as we crossed the street after a charity dinner. My instincts took over. I saw the headlights, heard the engines roar, and in that split second, my only thought was her. I threw all my weight into pushing her clear. The impact was a brutal, final punctuation mark. The first month was a blur of surgeries, pain, and a dawning, horrifying realization of my new reality. Clara was a constant presence. She held my hand. She cried with me. She told the nurses and our friends what a hero I was. The local news even ran a small story about it. Local architect's heroic act saves fiancé. She told them we were engaged. In my drugged haze, it felt like a promise. A confirmation that our foundation was strong enough to withstand this. But as the weeks turned into months, the visits became shorter. The hand-holding felt more perfunctory. Her stories about her day, once a welcome distraction, started to revolve around parties I couldn't attend and people I didn't know. A name began to surface more and more frequently. Julian. He was a real estate developer, she said, a friend who was being incredibly supportive through this difficult time. The inciting incident, the moment the ground truly fell away, wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet conversation on a Tuesday afternoon. I had been transferred to a long-term rehabilitation facility, a place of quiet desperation and forced optimism. Clara came in, not in her usual jeans and sweater, but in a sleek black dress. She looked like she was heading to a cocktail party, not a rehab center. She sat on the edge of the hard visitor's chair, her purse clutched in her lap. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Alex," she began, her voice carefully rehearsed. "We need to talk." I waited. I knew on some primal level what was coming. "This has been so hard. On both of us," she said. "Seeing you like this, it's heartbreaking." She finally looked at me, her eyes glistening with what I now recognized as manufactured sympathy. "You're a hero, Alex. You saved my life, and I will be grateful for that forever. But I have to be honest with myself. I'm young. I want a full life. I want to travel, to have children, to dance at my wedding." The words hung in the air, each one a perfectly aimed dart. "Dance at my wedding. I can't be the person you need right now," she continued, gaining momentum. "It wouldn't be fair to you. You deserve someone who can devote their entire life to your care. And you wouldn't want me to be trapped, would you? To grow to resent you? It's better to do this now, while we still love each other." I said nothing. My mind was a maelstrom of shock and a strange, cold clarity. The man who had thrown himself in front of a car for her was gone. In his place was a man in a wheelchair, a man who was now a liability, a project she had no interest in restoring. She took my silence as agreement. "I knew you'd understand," she whispered, relief washing over her face. She stood up, leaned down, and kissed my forehead. Felt like ice. "I'll have my mom help me pack up my things from the apartment. I'll check in on you," and then she was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving me in the silence. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum, the sound of a life being completely and utterly hollowed out. The hero was now just a man in a chair, and his savior had just walked out the door to find a life worth living. For a long time, I just stared at the wall, the hum of the fluorescent lights the only sound. The pain in my spine was a dull ache compared to the sharp, precise agony in my chest. But beneath the pain, something else was beginning to form. Not rage, not despair. It was a cold, hard resolve. It was the feeling I got when I looked at a crumbling building, just before I drew up the new blueprints. It was the decision to rebuild. The first call I made was not to a friend or a family member. It was to Marcus Thorne. Marcus was my oldest friend, my college roommate, and now my lawyer. We hadn't spoken much since the accident. I'd been keeping everyone at arm's length. He answered on the second ring. "Alex, is everything okay?" His voice was laced with concern. "She left me, Marcus," I said. My own voice sounded foreign, flat and devoid of emotion. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm on my way." An hour later, he was sitting in the same chair Clara had occupied. He didn't offer platitudes or condolences. He just listened as I recounted the conversation, word for word. His expression grew harder with each detail. When I finished, he was silent for a full minute, his gaze fixed on some point beyond the sterile walls of my room. "All right," he said finally, his tone all business. "The emotional response is to be hurt, to be angry. We're going to set that aside for now. We're going to be logical, strategic. First things first, your finances. The apartment is in your name only, correct? Yes, I said. The lease, the utilities, everything good. The house you bought. Sole ownership. The deed is mine. I used my own savings for the down payment. Joint accounts. 1. A checking account for household expenses. There's maybe $3,000 in it, Marcus nodded. A grim satisfaction on his face. Okay, that simplifies things. She has no legal claim to your primary assets. She'll try, though. She'll come for what she thinks she's owed for her time and emotional investment. He said the words with dripping sarcasm. We need to be prepared. It was then that I made the decision. The turning point. The moment I pivoted from victim to architect of my own vindication. I looked at Marcus, my oldest friend, the man who had seen me through every triumph and failure, and I told him the one thing very few people in the world knew. There's something else, Marcus, I said. Something she doesn't know about. My grandfather, Marcus frowned, confused. Your grandfather? I thought he passed away years ago. He did, I confirmed. But he didn't leave me his old watch collection. He left me everything. A portfolio of stocks, bonds, and real estate holdings so large and so well managed that I've never had to touch it. I live entirely off my salary as an architect. The inheritance just grows. Marcus's eyes widened. He ran a hand through his hair, a slow, stunned gesture. He knew my family had some money, but he had no idea of the scale. Alex, how much are we talking about? I told him. The number was obscene, a figure that belonged to the people Clara read about in magazines. A long, low whistle escaped his lips. My God, Alex, you've been living like a normal person. I am a normal person, I said. I love my work. I never wanted that money to define me. I wanted to build my own life. On my own terms. A bitter smile touched my lips. It seems my terms have just changed. A new light came into Marcus's eyes. The strategist in him was taking over. This changes everything, he said, leaning forward. Absolutely everything. She thinks she's trading up from a modest architect to a wealthy developer. She has no idea she just abandoned one of the city's wealthiest men for a mid-level shark in a nicer suit. The dramatic irony was thick enough to taste. So what's the plan? I asked. The plan, Marcus said, a predatory grin spreading across his face, is to do nothing. We let her go. We let her think she got away clean. We give her all the rope she needs to hang herself, and we document every single inch of it. We build a case so airtight, so irrefutable that when she eventually comes asking for more, and trust me, we won't just shut her down. We will dismantle her in that moment. Lying in that hospital bed, I felt a flicker of the man I used to be, the meticulous planner, the restorer. Clara and her mother thought they were demolishing my life. They were wrong. They had just cleared the site for a new project. And this time, the foundation would be made of cold, hard, indisputable fact. The next few months were a study in duality. By day, I was the dedicated patient, pushing my body through the grueling agony of physical therapy. I learned to navigate the world from a seated position, to transfer from my chair to a car, to dress myself. Each small victory was a monumental effort, a testament to a will I didn't know I possessed. My therapists praised my stoicism and determination. They saw it as part of my healing. It was, but not just for my body. Every ounce of focus I poured into my physical recovery was discipline I was also applying to my new secret project. By night, my rehab room became a war room. Marcus would visit after his workday, bringing a laptop and files. The first thing we did was hire a private investigator, a discreet ex-cop named Frank who specialized in matrimonial cases. His first task was simple. Observe. The reports started coming in within a week. Clara had, as expected, moved in with Julian. His apartment was in a new, flashy glass tower downtown, the kind of place with a doorman and a rooftop pool. Frank's photos showed them dining at expensive restaurants, attending gallery openings, and laughing with friends. Clara was glowing. She had seamlessly transitioned into the life she'd always coveted. One detail in Frank's first report stood out. Julian's social circle seemed fascinated by Clara's story. Frank had managed to overhear a conversation at a bar. Julian was introducing her as my brave Clara, telling a rapt audience about her tragic ex-fiancé. The hero in the wheelchair, he was using my sacrifice as a social currency, painting himself as the sensitive man who was helping this poor, traumatized woman heal. It was nauseating. It was also perfect. He's building a narrative, Marcus said, scrolling through the photos on his laptop. And so are we. Ours just has the benefit of being true, while Frank gathered evidence of her new life. I began the process of building my fortress. Following Marcus's advice, I moved the entirety of my grandfather's portfolio into a series of complex, irrevocable trusts. On paper, my personal net worth plummeted to reflect only my architectural salary and the value of my properties. It was a shield, invisible but impenetrable. Next, we turned our attention to Julian. His name was Julian Croft, and his firm, Croft Development, was making a name for itself with aggressive, high-leverage projects. He was all flash, but a little digging revealed a foundation of debt. He leased his fancy car. His glass tower condo had 2 mortgages on it. His business was heavily leveraged with loans from a handful of private equity firms. "This is our entry point," Marcus said, pointing at the screen. "He's overextended. One bad project, one called loan, and his whole house of cards comes down through a labyrinth of shell corporations." I began to act. My asset manager, a stern but brilliant man named Mr. Abernathy who had served my grandfather for 40 years, executed the plan with silent efficiency. We didn't attack Julian directly. We simply bought the institutions that held his leash. Over the course of 2 months, my holding companies acquired a controlling interest in the small private equity firm that held the primary note on his flagship project. We also bought the debt on his condo and his car from the original lenders. Julian Croft was now, for all intents and purposes, my employee and my tenant. He just didn't know it. The feeling of power was unsettling, but it was dwarfed by a sense of profound, logical satisfaction. I was simply reinforcing my own foundations. Throughout this period, Clara maintained a facade of concern. She would call once a week. The calls were always short, filled with her talking about how busy she was, how supportive Julian was being. She'd ask how I was, but never waited for a real answer. "Oh, that's good, Alex. Keep fighting. I'm so proud of you," she'd say, her voice dripping with condescension. Her mother, Eleanor, even visited me once. She brought a pot of wilting chrysanthemums and a torrent of backhanded compliments. "You're looking better," she said, her eyes flitting around the drab room. "Clara is so worried about you. It's been so hard on her, you know. Thank goodness Julian is there to take care of her. He's in real estate, you know, very successful. He just bought her the most beautiful diamond tennis bracelet." I just nodded and thanked her for the flowers. I let them believe I was weak, broken, and alone. Their arrogance was my greatest asset. They saw a man in a wheelchair and assumed the man inside was as crippled as his legs. They saw my quiet acceptance as defeat. They had no idea I was watching, waiting, and building. The house, my Victorian brownstone, became my sanctuary. Once I was discharged from rehab, I moved into a temporary accessible apartment and poured my energy into its restoration. I hired a specialized contractor to make the ground floor fully accessible, with ramps, wider doorways, and a state-of-the-art kitchen and bathroom I could navigate easily. But I designed everything myself. I spent hours at the drafting table, my mind finding solace in the clean lines and precise calculations. Restoring that house was restoring myself. Every new beam was a piece of my own spine being reinforced. The inevitable escalation came 4 months after Clara left. It arrived in the form of a thick envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize. Marcus had predicted it perfectly. Clara was suing me. I read the document with a calm that surprised even myself. She was claiming common-law marriage status. She was demanding half of all my assets, including the full title to the brownstone, which she claimed was a shared project that she had emotionally supervised. She was also demanding lifetime alimony to compensate for the severe emotional trauma of witnessing my accident, and for the career opportunities she had sacrificed to care for me in the initial weeks. It was a work of fiction so audacious it was almost impressive. "She's overplaying her hand," Marcus said when I forwarded him the documents. "This is based on two false premises. One, that she has a legal claim which is tenuous at best, and two, that she knows what your assets are. She's shooting in the dark, aiming for the life she thinks you have. So what's our next move?" I asked. "We accept their request for mediation," Marcus said, a sharp edge to his voice. "We will let her, her mother, her new boyfriend, and her ambulance-chasing lawyer walk into a conference room, supremely confident. And then we will calmly and methodically take them apart, piece by piece, with the truth the day of the mediation arrived." It was a cold, gray morning. I dressed carefully in a simple dark gray suit, the trousers tailored to fit properly while I was seated. As I wheeled myself into the elevator, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked tired, perhaps, but my eyes were clear. The man looking back at me was not a victim. He was a man who knew the precise load-bearing capacity of every structure in the room. We arrived at the downtown law offices, a neutral territory chosen by the mediator. The conference room was large, with a long mahogany table and a panoramic view of the city skyline. Julian's glass tower was visible in the distance. Clara was already there, flanked by her lawyer, a slick man with too much gel in his hair, and her mother, Eleanor, who was dressed as if for a coronation. Julian sat slightly apart from them, looking smug and proprietary. He nodded curtly at me, a gesture of magnanimous pity. Clara, on the other hand, wouldn't look at me at all. She stared fixedly at the legal pad in front of her, her expression a careful mask of pained nobility. She was playing the role of the wronged woman, forced into this unfortunate business by my supposed unwillingness to do the right thing. Marcus and I took our seats opposite them. The mediator, a retired judge named Henderson, entered and laid out the ground rules. He urged us to find a common ground, to resolve this without a costly court battle. Clara's lawyer, Mr. Davies, began. He launched into a florid speech about Clara's devotion, her sacrifice, her trauma. He painted a picture of a young woman whose life was irrevocably damaged by my accident, a woman who had stood by her heroic fiancé until the emotional toll became too great. He spoke of her reasonable expectations for a shared future and the assets acquired during their marriage-like relationship. He concluded by presenting their demand again. 50% of everything, the house, and a monthly alimony payment that was more than my architect's salary. When he finished, there was a heavy silence in the room. Eleanor was dabbing a tearless eye with a handkerchief. Clara looked pained and beautiful. Julian had an arm draped possessively around the back of her chair. Mediator Henderson turned to us. "Mr. Thorne, your response?" Marcus didn't stand. He simply opened a thin file folder in front of him. "My client's response is that Miss Evans's claims are predicated on a fantasy," he said, his voice calm and even. "A fantasy we are here today to dispel with facts," he started quietly. "Let's first address the nature of the relationship. Mr. Miller and Miss Evans were dating. They never presented themselves as married, they never filed joint taxes, and they maintained separate finances, with the exception of one small joint account for household bills." He slid a bank statement across the table. "An account, I might add, which Miss Evans emptied via ATM withdrawal of $2,900 the day after she informed my client of her departure." Clara's head snapped up. A faint blush colored her cheeks. "That was my money," she hissed. "The records show you deposited less than a third of the funds in that account over its lifetime," Marcus countered without missing a beat. "But that's a minor point. Let's move on to the claim of emotional trauma and dedicated care." He pulled out a second document. It was Frank's initial report. "We have here a timeline, compiled from eyewitness accounts, social media posts, and credit card receipts. It shows that in the final month of my client's hospital stay, the period Miss Evans claims was so traumatizing for her, she spent an average of 1 hour per day at the hospital. It also shows that during that same period, she had 17 dinners, for gallery openings, and 2 weekend trips to the wine country with Mr. Croft." Here, Julian stiffened. Clara went pale. Her lawyer, Davies, started to bluster. This is an invasion of privacy. My client's personal life is not relevant. It becomes relevant when she is using that personal life as the basis for a multimillion-dollar claim, Marcus said icily. He then produced a stack of glossy 8 by 10 photographs and laid them on the table like playing cards. They were from Frank, Clara and Julian laughing at a restaurant, kissing by the rooftop pool of his building, holding hands while shopping for jewelry. The timestamp on one photo of them kissing was from a week before she had broken up with me. Eleanor gasped. Clara looked like she had been struck. We were just friends. He was supporting me. The support seems to have been quite intimate, Marcus noted dryly. Which brings us to the core of this claim. The assets. Miss Evans is demanding half of my client's wealth. The problem is, she has vastly overestimated it. Davies smirked. We've done our homework, Thorne. We know about the properties, the stock portfolio. Your client is a wealthy man pretending to be a humble architect. My client is a humble architect, Marcus said. That is how he makes his living. As for his other holdings, he opened a second, much thicker file. My client was the beneficiary of a significant inheritance. However, concerned about exactly this kind of predatory litigation, he took prudent steps to protect his family's legacy. As of 3 months ago, 100% of the inherited assets were transferred into a series of irrevocable trusts for the benefit of his future children and various charitable foundations. My client is a salaried employee of his own life. His personal net worth is, in fact, quite modest. He slid the trust documents across the table. Davies snatched them, his eyes scanning the dense legal text. His face, which had been a mask of smug confidence, began to crumble. He was seeing it. The legal firewall was perfect. They had been suing a ghost. This is a trick, Eleanor screeched, her voice shrill. He's hiding the money. It's not hidden, madam, Marcus said. It's protected. And it is well beyond your daughter's reach. The room was silent except for Clara's ragged breathing. She was staring at me now, her eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning, horrified understanding. She had thrown away a king because she thought he was a pawn. But the final act was yet to come. As for the house, Marcus continued, his voice dropping, Miss Evans has no claim to it whatsoever. It was purchased by Mr. Miller alone with his own funds prior to the accident. And since she is so fond of it, she should know that the restoration is nearly complete. It's quite beautiful, he paused, letting the weight of their total defeat settle in the room. Then, he turned his gaze to Julian Croft, who had been unnaturally quiet. That leaves just one piece of business, Marcus said, pulling out a final document. Mr. Croft, you are the principal of Croft Development, are you not? Julian, looking confused, nodded slowly. What does that have to do with anything? Well, you see, your primary lender, the private equity group Oakhaven Capital, was recently acquired by a larger holding company, Marcus explained conversationally. A very private one. That holding company has reviewed your portfolio and noted several concerning irregularities, including significant cost overruns on your current downtown project and the use of a corporate expense account for non-business-related activities. He gestured vaguely toward the pictures of Clara on the table. As the legal representative of that holding company, Marcus said, his voice now like chips of ice, I am here to inform you that your line of credit has been frozen, effective immediately. Furthermore, the board has voted to terminate your position as principal for gross mismanagement. You will be hearing from our transition team this afternoon. Julian's face went from tanned and confident to a sickly mottled gray. You can't do that. Who are you? Marcus smiled, a chilling, final gesture. I'm the lawyer for the man who now owns your company. He then slid 2 more papers across the table. Oh, and these are just formalities. The notes on your condominium and your car have also been acquired. We'll be calling them in. I believe you have 30 days. The collapse was instantaneous and total. Julian shot to his feet, knocking over his chair. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. He looked at Clara with pure, unadulterated venom. The supportive, sensitive man was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. Clara finally broke. A low, guttural sob escaped her lips. She turned to me, her carefully constructed mask of composure shattered into a million pieces. Her face was a mess of tears and dawning terror. "Alex," she choked out, her voice pleading. "Alex, please. I didn't know. I made a mistake. Terrible mistake. We can fix this. Please." Her mother was babbling, something about misunderstandings and second chances. Her lawyer was shuffling his papers, his face ashen, already mentally calculating how he was going to get paid for this disaster. I looked at Clara. I saw the woman I had once loved, the woman I would have died for. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a profound, quiet emptiness where that love used to be. The restoration was complete. The rot had been cut away. I looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time since she'd walked out of my hospital room. And for the first and only time since the mediation began, I spoke. "No, Clara," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And now you get to live with it." With that, I turned my wheelchair around. Marcus stood and held the door for me. I didn't look back. I wheeled myself out of the conference room, leaving the wreckage of their lives behind me. The sounds of her hysterical sobbing and Julian's strangled curses faded as the heavy door clicked shut. I kept my eyes forward, navigating the long hallway toward the elevators, toward the rest of my life. The walk away, so to speak, was the easiest thing I had ever done. 2 weeks later, I was sitting on the newly built deck of my restored home. The Victorian brownstone was magnificent. It was a perfect blend of old-world character and modern accessibility. The original woodwork shone. The stained glass windows cast rainbows on the polished floors, and every switch, every counter, every doorway was designed for my independence. It was more than a house. It was a statement, a declaration that I was not broken. Marcus was with me. We were drinking a very old, very expensive scotch that Mr. Abernathy had sent over as a quiet congratulations. The evening was calm, the sun setting over the trees that lined my street. "Heard from Croft," Marcus said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "He declared bankruptcy. The company is being restructured under a new management team. Apparently, he tried to get Clara to help him, but she had nothing left to give. And her?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Last Frank heard, she and her mother moved into a small rental apartment out in the suburbs. Eleanor had to sell her own house to cover their legal fees and debts. Clara's trying to get a job, but the story of the mediation, it got around. She's become something of a social pariah." I nodded, taking a sip of the scotch. It burned in a pleasant way. I felt no joy in her ruin, but I felt a deep sense of justice, of balance restored. She hadn't been punished by me. She had been crushed by the weight of her own character. I had simply stepped out of the way and let gravity do its work. I looked out at the garden I had designed, where new saplings were just beginning to take root. The accident had taken my ability to walk. It had confined me to a chair, but it had also unshackled me. Clara's betrayal, as painful as it was, had forced me to build a new life, a life on a foundation not of romantic illusion, but of unshakable self-respect. They thought my paralysis was my weakness. In the end, it was the source of my clarity. It had stripped away everything that wasn't essential and showed me what was truly strong. I had lost the use of my legs, but I had finally learned how to stand on my own.